Thanks to everyone who makes this service possible, including everyone attending on Zoom. We're glad you're here. We create worship together, and we appreciate your presence. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Durango is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. We are a people of diverse ages, backgrounds, and beliefs. We affirm and promote 7 principles as strong values and moral guides. These principles include and affirm the worth and dignity of every person, the importance of justice, compassion, and acceptance for all, a responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and a recognition as being part of an interdependent web of all existence. We live out of these principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality, drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. We are a welcoming congregation. All people of goodwill are welcomed here. Whatever your gender identification or expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, immigration status, or economic class, we offer you a non-judgmental religious home where you can cultivate your own conscience. We define worship as shaping things of worth. In doing so, we create community, providing opportunities for transformation. As we light our sanctuary chalice today, we invite you to also light a chalice at home, if you'd like. And as we prepare to say our words of affirmation, make sure you're muted on Zoom. Shannon will post the words in the chat. As Reverend Munro lights the chalice, please join me in our congregational covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, for these high purposes do we unite in worship.
I would guess that most of us know the biblical story of the Good Samaritan. The broad outline, anyway, if not the details. On the road to Jericho, a man, presumably Judean, has been beaten, robbed, and left for dead by the side of the road. A priest and then a Levite passing by, each going to the other side of the road to create as much distance as possible between them. And then the Samaritan comes along. Now, Samaritans were considered heretical by the Judeans. Even so, the Samaritan rescues the man, takes him to an inn, pays for his room and the wine and the oil that will be needed for his recovery, and then goes his way. He doesn't calculate that the man he saved might have left him for dead were the circumstances reversed. He just sees another human being in need and does what he can do. He asks for nothing in return. No repayment and no recognition. The Samaritan is forever nameless. This parable is held up as an example of how we should treat a stranger in need, without thought for which tribe the stranger belongs to, without thought for our own risk or the cost. It represents the ideal for such behavior. And like all stories, we are present in all the characters. We may recognize ourselves in the traveler left for dead, the priest, the Levite, the innkeeper, and the Samaritan. Which character will we be today? But there's something missing from this story, something critical to our notions of hospitality and law and custom. The story takes place in the wilderness, on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, a road notorious for its danger. And it seems obvious, but the road and the wilderness are not home to any of the characters. Hospitality requires a home dwelling, a home city, a home country, a safe place with boundaries, with borders. It requires invitation, consent, and reciprocity. The French philosopher Jacques Derrida saw hospitality as inviting and welcoming the stranger. And this takes place on different levels, of course. There's the personal level where the stranger is welcomed into our home as a guest. And there's a level of individual countries with the immigrant and the refugee. Many words associated with hospitality have evolved from this same Proto-Indo-European root word, gosti. And that had multiple meanings. It simultaneously meant stranger, guest, and host. And this root word evolved into the Latin root hostis, meaning enemy, army, and where the words host, as in a multitude, and hostile come from. And the combination of this root and another root word, meaning powerful, evolved into the Latin hospice, and eventually into hospice and hospitable, hospital, hospitality, host, as in a giver of hospitality, hostage, and hostel, as in a youth hostel. So it's a lot tangled up in the roots of these words. The Greek languages also evolved from the same source, giving us the Greek xenos, which also has the interchangeable meaning of guest, host, and stranger. And from xenos we get xenophobia, fear and hatred of the foreign, but also the word xenophilia, the attraction to the stranger, to the new, to the unknown. The stranger may bring danger, but they may also bring things worth knowing, novelty, and perhaps even salvation. The words hospitality and hostility share roots because the stranger is an unknown. They could be a threat, bringing not just physical danger, but new and destabilizing ideas or beliefs or possibilities. And at the beginning, we don't know. And so we must ask, is there a threat there? How far do we trust this stranger? What are the limits of our hospitality? Because in the real world, there are always going to be limits, and not to ask these questions would be foolish. Hospitality is a reciprocal relationship between host and guest in a home, and between a country and the refugee or the immigrant. And without that reciprocity, there can be no hospitality, because both host and guest are then adrift without an understanding of their relationship, of what is expected of them and where the boundaries are that cannot and should not be crossed. Now, Derrida made a distinction between unconditional hospitality, which he considered an impossibility, and normal hospitality, which in his view was always conditional. And in trying to imagine the extremes of a hospitality to which no conditions are set, there is a realization that unconditional hospitality could never be accomplished. It's not so much an ideal, it's an impossible ideal. This is the dilemma of hospitality. On the one hand, there is a moral imperative to show hospitality, especially to people in distress or fleeing from danger. And on the other hand, the total abandonment of borders would obliterate the home into which they are being invited. All borders have some degree of permeability, but if they become absolutely open, then the border itself is abolished, and there is no longer any place of safety, any home to enter. Hospitality assumes the ability to provide a safe haven. And like a filter, The border must inevitably be selective when allowing itself to be crossed. If refugees fleeing persecutors find their way through an opening, it cannot be equally open to those pursuing them. And guests are expected to respect the home and the host and help preserve that safety, that refuge and its boundaries. Conversely, to harm any guest in any way is a serious violation of our obligation as hosts to provide that safety. Xenophobia arises from the fear of the unknown and unfamiliar. And when times are troubled and the future uncertain, like now, our tribes get smaller, more defensive, more concerned with purity and enforcing right belief and right behavior as our tribe sees it, whatever tribe we may belong to. We circle the wagons, seeing the external world as even more hostile and dangerous. But interestingly enough, it's not total strangers we have the most trouble extending hospitality to. It's our outgroups. It's our Samaritans. Sigmund Freud noted that it is precisely communities with adjoining territories and related to each other in other ways as well, who are engaged in constant feuds and ridiculing each other. What makes an outgroup? Proximity plus small differences. If you want to know who someone hates, find the group that lives most closely intermingled with them and is most conspicuously similar to them, and chances are you'll find the group who they have years of seething hatred towards. 9 in 10 Americans think that the nation is more divided now than at any point in their lifetime. In a 2018 poll, roughly half of Democrats described Republicans as ignorant, 54%, spiteful, 44%, while a similar proportion of Republicans described Democrats as ignorant and spiteful. 61% of Democrats labeled Republicans racist, sexist, or bigoted, while a third of Republicans applied the same terms to Democrats. Perhaps most concerning of all, more than 20% of Republicans and Democrats describe members of the other party as evil. And only 4% of both parties think the other side is fair, and even fewer describe them as thoughtful or kind. Many would rather their children married an atheist or someone of another race or religion than marry someone from the other party. How do you welcome someone like that? So who is the stranger? There's a sense in which we're all strangers now. Many of us no longer recognize the country we grew up in and no longer feel safe. Many of us never felt safe here at all. And our lives are now riven by dozens of what appear to be insurmountable dividing lines. Politics and race and class and religion, nationality and sexuality, and, well, the list seems endless. We are divided within and without, and wholeness seems impossible. Our alienation makes us strangers even to ourselves. So who is the stranger? I am. You are. We are. They are. Whoever they are. And if we're all strangers, where's home? Where's safety? So I want to flip this question around and ask not who is the stranger, but rather, what kind of stranger am I? Am I a stranger who walks on by? Or one who stops and helps? Am I a stranger who acts only from self-interest? Or one who acts from a great generosity of spirit? the moment we forget that we are the stranger is the moment that we stumble in our practice of hospitality. True hospitality is risky, and we should never pat ourselves on the back and claim we are a hospitable people. Instead, we must always be asking how we can become more hospitable while at the same time avoiding the collapse of the region of safety implied in the word home. And this is not a liberal or conservative thing. This is an ancient human conundrum. Doritas is not a philosophy that offers definitive answers to this question. Such answers would be wrong, since we are dealing with a true dilemma. Instead, he alerts us to the fact that we are always in the situation of never having done enough. The hospitable person or country or organization should be seeking at all times to be more hospitable, alert to any opportunities to move in this direction, never saying, "We've done enough, we can't do more," but always seeking practical ways to do more than we have, to somehow feed just one more person, to somehow shelter just one more family, to somehow welcome just one more refugee. Welcoming the stranger is not just for their sake, but for ours. And it applies to everything unfamiliar and unknown. Hospitality, in terms of welcoming the stranger, is also an important spiritual practice for facing down our animal fears and anxieties, of learning to be more generous and less fearful, and more discerning about our boundaries. We can never make that practice perfect, but we are not called to be perfect. We are called to be hospitable, more hospitable, no matter how impossible that may ultimately seem. Thank you.